We are stronger together, and we are especially grateful to our subscribers and those who share our content. From the Walking the Walk series to the Legislative Review, from Democracy on the Front Lines to 2 Minutes of Truth. We are grateful to be able to spend some time with you. Let's get started with this episode of Democracy on the Front Lines. From the barrio to the Beltway, everywhere democracy matters. Hello, listeners. This is Eric Robbins, and I am here today with two of the organizers for Justice for All. And I have Margo and Moira here, and I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves in turn. Moira, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, I'm a volunteer and organizer with Pima County Justice for All. And the way I got involved was a friend of my son needed some immigration help, and I remembered Margo was doing that, got in touch with her. And at the time, DACA had just come out, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and I wound up doing DACA applications for about 8 years. And Margo will tell you about our campaign, but I will tell you I feel wonderful working on this.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And Margo?
My name's Margo Cowan, and we created the Keep Tucson Together pro bono immigration clinic many years ago, and it just became clear. It's all staffed by volunteer lawyers, and we prepare lay people to represent themselves. But it became clear that really what was needed was a public defender office to provide lawyers to represent people in immigration court who were too poor to hire a lawyer. And so we began the campaign a couple of cycles ago. And the first one we started just before the pandemic. And of course, we had to shut that one down. And we did a second cycle, and we collected thousands and thousands of signatures, but we didn't collect enough to get on the ballot. And so we're back. And it's just very, very important. It's critical that no one stand alone in immigration court and risk being deported themselves or having their family torn apart just because they're too poor to hire a lawyer. And that was the birth of the Keep Tucson Together Justice for All campaign.
Got it. Thank you so much. And for our listeners and those of you who remember what I'm going to start referring to as the Trump 1 era, pictures of children as young as 4, 5, 6 years old being forced to, quote unquote, represent themselves in these administrative hearings when they didn't even speak the language, much less, of course, they're minors. They can't represent themselves in any legitimate or meaningful way. And the farce of having that be some kind of administration of justice. That was still going on throughout the entire Trump cycle in Trump 1. Is that true, Margo?
Yes, it is. It is true. And I was had walked in on a couple of those hearings that were already in progress in the Tucson court, and it was just horrific to see teeny ones, 3, 4 years old, in chairs, sitting in chairs, and their feet didn't even get close to reaching the ground, and a judge talking to them. And I saw some of those kids, horrific, done in our name. Our country did that in our name.
Mm. We talked a little bit earlier before the recording started. Can you help elaborate for our listeners what it means to be out of status? Some of the people who are being targeted for these types of hearings, they didn't necessarily get caught at the border per se. What does out of status mean, and how does it impact this community?
Yeah, that's a great question. Out of status simply means that you're not a lawful permanent resident, or you don't have a work permit, and you have no document. You weren't born in the United States, and you have no document that says that you're permitted to be in the United States. But there are, I would venture a guess, of thousands of families in Tucson where one parent is not documented and the other parent is a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. They have U.S. citizen kids. And for whatever reason, mostly because they didn't have enough money to retain counsel to file the appropriate papers, the father or the mother remains out of status. And so those are what we call undocumented people. And it's just that they don't qualify. It's not that they don't qualify for something, it's that they have no idea how to pursue what they qualify for to regularize their status. And they tend to be working class people, so they don't have money to retain somebody to buy knowledge, essentially, to figure out how to regularize their status.
Got it. I appreciate that clarity. Thank you. And we spoke again, before, but to help for our listeners, you told me the story of how you got started in this work originally. What was kind of your origin or activation story, Margo?
Well, I was a VISTA volunteer in San Diego County, the end of the 60s. It was a great time. And during that time, I met Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and I was fortunate enough to run a strike for the Farm Workers Union. And then I came home, and people began to, I was hired as a director of one of the War on Poverty agencies in Barrio Hollywood, kind of at the end of that program. And the Border Patrol, there wasn't ICE then, would wait outside Mass at St. Margaret's Church and would go to the soccer games there in Menlo Park on Sunday afternoons and just arrest people, families, and people coming out of church and fellows playing soccer, and they would immediately be deported. And so I began to figure out how to organize a campaign that would share information about what people's rights were and what they should do and how they could protect themselves. And essentially, I've worked in that area ever since.
Margo, help me understand what the petition that we have before us does specifically, please.
Sure. What it does is, comparable to people that are facing criminal charges. There's a scale, and if you meet the scale of indigency, your income is lower than whatever the scale is set for the number of people in your family. You're appointed a public defender to represent you in that matter. And sometimes people that are a little bit above the scale, but not really able to retain counsel, are also appointed a public defender, but they have to pay a little something along the way. And it's the same theory. It's for families who are put in deportation proceedings and who are too poor to hire a lawyer based on essentially the same scale. Then they're appointed counsel. And if they're able to be in the next bracket up and contribute a bit, they're required to pay something. And that's what it would do. It would set up essentially a public defender office to represent people who are put in deportation proceedings who are too poor to retain counsel. And this would be the first initiative of this type created by voters in Pima County to create this kind of public defender office, the first in the country.
So there's no program like this statewide, and there's no program like this in other states?
There's not. There are some nonprofits that provide lawyers to represent people, but obviously they have limits and they can't represent everybody who would qualify. Just like you couldn't, a nonprofit couldn't represent everybody charged with a crime who qualified. It's too big a bite.
And I assume this would also be applicable for any unaccompanied minors. So this whole nightmare of little children, trying to represent themselves in these administrative hearings would also be covered under this?
It would absolutely be covered because none of these kids would have an income.
Got it. Thank you so much. And I understand, again, from our prior discussion, there were a couple of examples that you gave me. Can you elaborate on those, please? Can you tell me about one of those examples?
Well, the one that has occurred just a little bit ago, a couple of weeks ago, was a woman and her two children, I think they were 6 and 9, from Venezuela, and they had gone to Safeway to get something that she needed to finish fixing dinner. It's about 9:30 at night. They were stopped by a Tucson police officer, and he didn't ask them for her. She didn't ask her for her driver's license, and instead he asked her for her papers. And within minutes, I don't know if it was Border Patrol or ICE, was there and took her and her two kids, 6 and 9, into custody, left the car right there on the road. And this was, like I say, about 9:30 at night. 5 o'clock in the morning, she was in Tapachula, Mexico, had been deported. And Tapachula is below Mexico City. So that's a good long ride. And again, it happened between 9:30 at night, and she's there already 5 o'clock in the morning. And that was done in our name. And that's just wrong. Everybody under law has the opportunity to tell an immigration judge their story and say why they should qualify to be able to stay in the United States.
And what happened to the children that she was with? You said she was with a 6 and a 9-year-old. Did they get returned to their father here in the United States, or did they send them out of the country too?
They were also deported.
They were also deported. And
they were scared to death.
And the father had no idea what happened to his wife or his kids.
That's right. And the family was in asylum proceedings. So they should have never been removed.
Thank you for that. And the other example you gave me, we're talking about a family, in this case from Venezuela, who got literally dumped in a foreign country, in another foreign country. This happens systematically, right? This is happening to lots of people. Is that true?
Oh, it happens all the time. The process now is that if people, for example, they're crossing through the desert, and they once you step foot on U.S. soil, and you tell an officer of the United States, Customs, Border Patrol, ICE, whomever, I want to apply for asylum. The law, which is still the law, triggers a process about how you do that. And you can't be removed until you've had an opportunity to exhaust your rights under the law. And at this moment, people that are coming through and are detained in the desert or found on a street in Tucson are immediately put on a bus and turned around and dumped in Nogales, Sonora, regardless of their country of origin.
So it's not only a violation of our own laws, it's clearly a violation of human rights to do that to any other person, including young children.
Absolutely.
What can people do? This is a question I get quite frequently at the party. What are we doing? What can I do? What are some specific examples of things that individuals or allied groups can do to help with this petition in particular, and with Justicia para Todos, or Justice for All?
Yeah, there's tons of things to do. But in my view, the most important thing is to either come here to the party office or come to Keep Tucson Together's office, which is 730 South Osborne, pick up petitions, get signatures from registered voters in Pima County. Let's get this on the ballot. Let's create a public defender office so that everybody who's too poor, everybody who's indigent, will be represented by appointed counsel so that their stories can be told. And where there is relief under existing law, they can take advantage of that. And where there isn't relief under existing law, that's a different story. But at least they have somebody to tell their story.
Got it. And I'm proud to say that Pima County Democratic Party's executive committee recently voted to endorse and to support Justice for All in this petition in particular. So people are welcome to come to the Pima County Democratic Party headquarters and either sign the petition. We're on Speedway between Tucson and Campbell on the south side. And we would also provide petitions to anybody who wants to help gather them. I'm assuming if people go to your offices, they can also sign the petition and or pick up petitions to go gather signatures on your behalf.
Yeah, that's true. And we need all the help we can get. We need a ton of signatures, thousands of them. We need to file not this July, but next July 1st. And this really needs to be on the ballot. This is the right thing to do. And, Tucson's a special place. And those of us that live here understand how we treat each other, and we respect each other. And we all have a contribution to our puzzle, which is Tucson, and it's rich. And so it is very important that folks come by, not only sign, but they pick up a petition or two and they get them filled up and they bring them back, because we want to show not only Tucson, Southern Arizona, the rest Arizona, and our country, that in Tucson we treat people right. And we don't set up people to be deported, be thrown out in a situation they have no idea about what's happening. Or kids. I've come on hearings that were not publicized in immigration court where there were, I'll never forget this image in my mind. There was a little girl that maybe she was 3, and she was sitting at the bench there in the court, and her legs were probably 6-8 inches off the ground. She couldn't touch, her feet didn't even touch the ground. And the judge is telling her all these things and ordering her deported. Now that's not even horrific, that's a sin. And in Tucson, that's not who we are. We're better than that. Nobody should stand alone.
I agree. And so you said this petition gathering phase will go through next July, and then it would be on the ballot November of 2026?
Yes, July 1st next year we have to file.
Okay, appreciate that. Myra, would you like to add anything to our conversation here before we wrap up?
Yes, just people hearing a petition, there's 15 signatures per petition, and you can ask family, friends, neighbors, people you work with. We're happy to answer any questions. Let me give you my number. It's 520-360-9516. And my email is moirasilver14@gmail.com. And our office, again, is 730 South Osborne. And Pima County Democratic Headquarters is at 2302 East Speedway. Happy to explain, answer any questions. Thank you.
And we'll list those contact information in the description down below. Margo, go ahead and bring us home. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
You know, this is just really important. And it's important that we express who we are as Tucsonans. And we don't believe, I am convinced that as a body politic here in Tucson, Arizona, we don't believe that it's okay to have kids go alone and sit in front of immigration judges, or to have families torn apart. You know, most of us know somebody who is out of status, a neighbor, somebody that, you know, works at the church, somebody that, you know, coaches the baseball team. Most of us know somebody. And these are people that we need to stand with. And I know that our town is the town to set the standard for the way that we treat people that are put in deportation proceedings. And it's not to send them alone.
Hear, hear. Myra, thanks for joining us. Margo, thanks for joining us today with the Pima County Democracy Podcast. This is Eric Robbins. Folks, you've heard the call. Let's get busy.